Hello, girls and boys.
Hello.
Let's recap. What is happening in Flora
Ulysses.
by
DiCamillo.
what has been happening? Raise your hand so you can help us catch up to where we were. First, yes.
I think Donald gave the mom a vacuum.
So it wasn't the mom, it was the neighbor. At first, I think we were confused with who were the people, the Tickmans and the, what was the last one? Oh, that's Dan Gutman, that's another author. There was the Tickmans and and then there were the Buckmans. So the Buckmans, wow, that's not going to confuse us. The Buckmans got the Ulysses 2000X. Mr. Buckman brought Mrs. Buckman a vacuum cleaner. Mrs. Buckman went outside to vacuum. She vacuumed up a
Squirrel.
and Flora found it, saved it, gave it mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Yeah.
Don't do that, please. This is not a true story. That is not a...
It's actually a movie.
It is a movie, but it's not a true story. So then, the mom is an author. She writes romance novels. So they're unrealistic. Let's just go there. You know how you have realistic fiction? This is unrealistic fiction. Life is not a romantic novel. Life is a little tricky. And while she was busy typing on her typewriter, we think she likes her writing more than she likes her Flora. At least that's what Flora feels. She is a cynic, probably because life has been a little rough on her. But she has saved a squirrel, and she's named the squirrel Ulysses. So now Ulysses the squirrel has been hidden in the house. Chapter 11. A gigantic vat of incandesto. So incandesto is the graphic novel that she reads, and a vat is a large container. That's a large vat.
Oh my god.
It could be like this big. It could be like that big. It could be like a planter size outside in your front steps on your landscape that you worked so hard on this weekend. She put Ulysses down on her bed, and he looked even smaller sitting there in the bright overhead light. He also looked pretty bald.
Wow. Well, how did they do?
Bald, let's go back to the picture of, just to remind you what happened after the vacuum cleaner vacuumed it.
Oh. Right.
Right? It vacuumed off her fur, his fur, its fur.
What's for?
The squirrel, Ulysses' fur. So it looked quite bald. It's okay, she said. Ulysses, come here, come here. And without thinking, he moved towards her. And he believed her. It was astonishing. That's a pretty big word, astonishing. Everything was astonishing. The sun setting was illuminating each blade of grass. It was reflecting off the girl's glasses, making a halo of light around the girl's round head, setting the whole world on fire. The squirrel thought, when did things become so beautiful? And if it has been this way all along, how is it that I never noticed it before? Listen to me, the girl said. My name is Flora. Your name is Ulysses. Okay, thought the squirrel. And she put her hand on him, and she picked him up, and she cradled him in her left arm. He felt nothing but happiness. Why had he always been so terrified of humans? He could not imagine. Actually, he could imagine. There had been this time when a boy had a BB gun. There had truthfully been a lot of incidences with humans and BB guns.
What are yeah,
Hey, I read this already.
yeah, you did.
I did, because the next one is about, oh gosh. Sorry, did I forget to put a bookmark there? I did. I have done that before. Oh, the giant vat of incendisto, chapter 11. She put Ulysses down on a bed and he looked good. All right. He also looked pretty bad. Good grief, said Flora. The squirrel certainly didn't look very heroic. But then neither did the nearsighted, unassuming janitor, Alfred T. Slipper. Ulysses looked up at Flora. You're going to put that on your desk instead of playing with it. Thank you. He seemed to be relieved to see that he still had his tail. He lowered his nose and he sniffed along the length of it. I am hoping that you understand me, said Flora. The squirrel raised his head and stared at her. Wow, said Flora. Great, okay, I can't understand you, and that's a small problem, but we'll figure out a way to communicate. Nod at me if you understand what I'm saying, like this. And Flora nodded. And Ulysses nodded. Flora's heart leaped up in her chest. So it didn't really leap up, but what did she feel? Like, an excitement feeling. Because if her heart leaped up in her chest, that would cause a major malfunction with her internal organs. So it's just a figure of speech. Okay, great. I'm going to try to explain what happened, okay? Ulysses nodded his head very fast. And again, Flora's heart leaped up inside her in a hopeful and extremely uncynical kind of way. She closed her eyes. Don't hope, she told her. Don't hope, do not hope, instead observe. Do not hope, instead observe with a piece of advice that always appears often in the terrible things that can happen to you according to terrible things. Hope sometimes got in the way of action. For instance, if you look at your elderly Aunt Edith choking on a piece of steak, oh gosh, from an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you told yourself, oh, I hope she's not choking, you would waste several valuable seconds. Woo. Do not hope, instead observe were Flora's useful words. She repeated them to herself a lot. Okay, said Flora, and she opened her eyes. She looked at the squirrel. What happened is that you got vacuumed. And because you got vacuumed, you might have some powers. Ulysses gave her a questioning look. Ulysses? But that's how it goes in the book. So you might notice that sometimes books and movies are a little different, and that's really good of you to observe that. You should always be observing. Do not hope, just observe. I mean, you should always be hoping, in my uncynical way. You should always have hope. Do you know what a superhero is? And the squirrel continued to stare at her. Right, of course you don't. A superhero is someone with special powers, and he uses those powers to fight and the force of darkness and evil. He fights the forces of darkness and evil like Alfred T. Slipper, who is also the incendisto. Ulysses blinked several times in a nervous way. Look, said Flora, and she grabbed the ultimate adventures, illuminated adventures of the amazing incendisto off her desk. She pointed at Alfred in his janitor uniform. So in this fiction comic book that she reads, the janitor is the superhero. It's an unassuming position, meaning you don't think he could possibly be a superhero. So who amongst us is unassuming? Who is the superhero?
Squirrel, Ulysses. The janitor.
I mean, among us.
Ulysses. Among us?
Among us? is the superhero here?
You. No, it's Ulysses. Because I already watched the movie. Yeah, that's what I said.
Don't spoil.
Thank you.
I'm talking about here.
Thank you for spoiling.
Here in room 28.
I am you.
Is it you?
No, you're the superhero.
Is it you?
It's me.
Is it you?
It's me,
It's you, I know it is.
No, that's a lot. It's me, Abraham.
So one day, Alfred takes a tour of the Incandisto cleaning solution factory and he slips.
Ulysses, I already watched
See, get it? Alfred T. Slipper, get it?
the
Into a giant vat of Incandisto. And it changes him. And so now there's a great crisis when the maleficent is apparent. Alfred turns himself into... Flora flipped through the pages of the comic book and stopped at the panel that showed the glowing, powerful Incandisto. See, Alfred T. Slipper becomes the righteous pillar of light, so painfully bright that it most hideous villains tremble before him, confessing. Flora realizes that she was shouting the teeniest bit. She looked down at Ulysses. His eyes were enormous for his small face. Flora tried to sound calm and reasonable. She lowered her voice. As Incandisto said, Alfred sheds light into the darkest corners of the universe. He can fly. Also, he visits the elderly, and that's what a superhero is. And I think you might be one too. At least I think you have powers. So far, all we know about you is that you're really strong. What's the evidence of him being really strong? He lifted up the Ulysses 2000X.
That's like 2 pounds.
For a squirrel?
Yeah.
Think of the size.
That size.
Ulysses nodded and he puffed out his chest. Flora, her mother shouted, get down here, dinner is ready. But what else can you do? She said to the squirrel. And if you are truly a superhero, how will you fight evil? Ulysses furrowed his eyebrows. Furrow.
Just let the squirrel be.
Flora bent down. She put her face close to his. Think about it, she said. Imagine what we might be able to do. Flora Bell, her mother shouted. I can hear you up there talking to yourself. You shouldn't talk to yourself. People will hear you and think you are strange. I'm not talking to myself, she responded back. Well then, to whom are you speaking? A squirrel.
Oh, that's just gave it away.
There was a long silence. That's not funny, her mother shouted. Flora Bell, get down here right now. So even though she tells the truth, her mother doesn't believe her. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could tell the truth, and as weird as it is, sometimes adults are not going to hear you.
Yeah. You don't need to believe.
All right, that's it. Chapter 12, tomorrow, the forces of evil. Bum, bum, bum.